And hello, Hearts of Oak. Thanks so much for joining us once again. It's great to have Matt Strickland back with us. It's only been a few months, Matt, but always good to have you. Thanks so much for giving us your time today.
Yeah, of course, man. It's always great to be on with you, Peter. I love the show, and I love being a part of it even more, man. So thanks for having me back on, brother.
Not all. It's we don't get to talk as much as we should, and this is a way
No,
of catching
no,
up. So it's all good. People can obviously follow you. That is your X handle. So make sure and jump on and follow Matt. And it was one of his posts about turning up to work and going home. Now, Matt, you run a restaurant business, Gourmeltz, and the link will be there in the description. That's your focus since you came back from serving your country abroad. Um, but you decided to apply also for a government role. Do you want to fill us in? It's not as if you need that. You probably got enough on your plate running a restaurant.
yeah. Well, you know about the fight I took on in my restaurant during COVID.
Yes.
For those that don't know, I was the only restaurant in the state of Virginia to fight back against the COVID mandates, and because of that, I lost a lot of money in the process. It was a 3.5 year long fight. It cost me well into six figures to fight it, all the money that I had. So finally, early 2024, late 2023, that fight finally ended and we won. I was able to prove that those mandates were indeed unconstitutional. And I sent the state of Virginia's government, their attorney general's office, packing with the loss. But like I said, it took everything that I had monetarily to fight that fight, but it was worth every penny. So I have a background. I was in the military. I was a security contractor for a long time. Also worked as an intelligence analyst. So I decided to, since the economy is kind of unstable and we don't know which way it's going to go, didn't want to open multiple restaurants, although we're ready to at Gourmeltz. I wanted to see where the economy was going to take us. So, in the meantime, since my restaurant was kind of running itself now, and we were out of that legal battle, I decided to take a position up at the Department of Homeland Security's headquarters, actually in the Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction office as an intelligence analyst. And our focus was on chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear weapons. So I took that position in March of 2024. And like you said, just, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks ago, got fired for once again fighting back.
So tell us, you're someone who is opinionated, and I think the worst thing I think in someone is just not actually caring and not actually. When you discuss with some people, you just get a blank look because they've got zero interest in anything outside maybe their own small world and outside their TV. But you say what you think. You put your thoughts online. So it wasn't as if you were some shy, quiet figure that would just slip in the corner and just kind of go through the instructions.
No, and I think when they hired me, they weren't aware of who I was, and they weren't aware of the fight that I just finished in the state of Virginia. So I made a post that's kind of ironic now, but a couple of weeks before I got fired, I put a post on X that says, I snuck in the back door, but I have no doubt that very quickly, very soon, I'll be shown the front door. And it was because for the last couple of months that I was at DHS headquarters, I was working under a very hostile work environment because they did find out who I was. And the reason they found out who I was is because I blew the whistle on a few things. So as soon as I took that job as an intelligence analyst up at DHS headquarters, I noticed very quickly that a lot of intel analysts throughout the US government, not just at DHS, were putting out very politically biased intel reports and intel bulletins and intel notes. And it's important to not do that because this is actionable intel. So other intel entities and other agencies within the US government, when they see those intel reports, they take it as gospel and they act on it. So I'll give you the first intel report that came across my desk that I sent a red flag up on that really painted a target on my back. If you remember, just a few months ago, we had a hurricane here in the US, in North Carolina, Hurricane Helene, and it decimated a huge portion of the mountains up in North Carolina. And a lot of US citizens lost everything that they have worked their whole lives for. And you probably saw in the news that the response from FEMA and the federal government just as a whole was inadequate, to put it nicely. It was non-existent for the first couple of weeks. So if you remember on social media, the victims of Hurricane Helene, they were speaking out, very loudly about the lack of response from our federal government, the government that they've paid taxes to their entire lives. And a report came across my desk that highlighted these grievances that the victims of Hurricane Helene were speaking about. And the intel report actually said that these victims of Hurricane Helene, these U.S. citizens that have constitutional rights, were spreading conspiracy theories on social media that could potentially put FEMA workers that show up in North Carolina in harm's way. And the conspiracy theories that they highlighted that these US citizens were saying on social media were that FEMA doesn't have enough money to make it to the end of the hurricane season, which is not a conspiracy theory because Secretary Mayorkas actually said that on national TV more than one time. And they also said another conspiracy theory these victims are spreading is that FEMA gave, in support of housing illegal immigrants, millions of dollars to outside organizations outside of FEMA. And that's not a conspiracy theory either, because FEMA actually paid over $300 million to the US government to house illegal immigrants. And just a bunch of different accusations like that, that were actual facts, not conspiracy theories. And they were surveilling these citizens because of that and targeting these citizens. And so I flagged that report. I said, hey guys, we can't target these US citizens for spreading facts on social media. And I believe we're violating their constitutional rights surveilling them anyway, as an intel organization. And I sent that report up through my chain of command, and I never heard any response back on it, for days. And multiple times I followed up on it and asked for a response. Like, hey guys, what are we going to do about this? Sent you this a week ago. And finally, as I pushed and pushed and pushed, I got a response back that said, hey, Matt, this is not your lane. You're only to be working on chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear weapons. So why are you even weighing in on this? And my response was, well, it came across my desk to review. I was asked to review it. So I reviewed it. And although this isn't about chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear weapons, it does pertain to me as a U.S. citizen. And I'm seeing in this report obvious illegal surveillance going on by our U.S. government. So just as a U.S. citizen, it's my duty and my obligation to bring that up and blow the whistle on this. So nothing happened. They basically told me, well, this is in our lane as a CWMD office, so we're not going to do anything about it. And they didn't. And that report was published as is. And those citizens in North Carolina, those victims that just lost everything, continue to be surveilled by our U.S. government. And from that point, it was on. They knew who I was. They looked into my background, and they started sending articles that I was quoted in the Washington Post that had nothing to do with my job. It was, some of them were actually before I took on this job, to try to get me fired because I was there as a contractor. So they sent, for example, you remember, and I think you had me on about this, the two Jordanians that tried to run the gate at Quantico Marine Corps Base.
Yeah.
So I was the one that broke that story.
Yeah.
And Washington Post, they called me for comment on that. They asked me what I thought it was. And I told them, obviously, I don't know what it was. But when my time in Iraq and Afghanistan tells me that it could be a dry run, because what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan before somebody drove a V-bit up to the gate and detonated it, they do 5 or 6 dry runs to see what the security response was going to be. So I told the Washington Post that's exactly what this could be. And that's basically the gist of what I said in that article. Well, my supervisor up at DHS sent that article to my contracting company and said what I said in that article was politically biased. I don't know how that was politically biased, but that's what they said. And they tried to get me fired over it. And my contracting company, rightfully so, told them this is not a fireable offense. So you guys might want to re-examine that. And I outlasted that complaint. And from that point on, it was just a hostile work environment where they were zeroing in on. Well, first of all, after I sent that first report up, they told me not to review anything outside of CBR and weapons. But I continued to get reports that came across my desk outside of that, because what happens is in the intel community, for example, if you're in the intel shop at the FBI and you write an intel report on something involving your program, you'll send that intel report out US government wide to the different intel shops just for review to see if any other shops have any comment on it. So there were multiple intel reports that came across my desk that I saw obvious politically biasedness in it, and actually some violations of the Constitution, in my opinion. And I would send those to my supervisors, and nothing would happen. And then, if you remember December, you remember all those drones that were flying around the DC area and New Jersey, really all across the US. Well, I would ask my supervisors in the intel shop where I was at why we're not even talking about that in the intel shop, because our job is to protect the homeland, the US, from any kind of CBRN weapon. And we have talked about and many times we've talked about how different state actors and non-state actors were trying to equip drones with CBRN weapons. So I said, hey guys, not seeing any reports that these are equipped with CBRN weapons, but isn't this worth us taking a look into when the media and different government agencies are saying out loud that they have no idea what these drones are, where they're coming from, or who are operating them? Why are we not even talking about this, guys? And I got ignored once again, and basically was told this is not our lane. We don't do anything with drones. We are CBR and weapons specific. And I said, once again, we don't know what these drones are equipped with. So shouldn't we at least be taking a look into it? And this is what the US government does. This is what people at the GS-15 level and SES level, this is what they do, is they kick the can down the road, and they don't want to get involved in anything because they're so risk adverse. They just want to be the gray man and not bring any attention to them or their position or their program, so that they continue to get promoted. That's what the US government is about, not actual action, but risk adverseness and inaction, actually. Because the your main goal and objective as a GS-15 or SES is to not bring any unwanted attention, any heat to your program. So they don't get involved in anything that could potentially be controversial. And that was evident to me day one when I stepped in there, because they asked me, they said, hey, Matt, what do you think the biggest chemical weapon threat to the US is right now? And I told them, well, it's pretty easy. It's fentanyl, because fentanyl is the leading killer of Americans age 18 to 45. And we know that over 90% of the precursors to make fentanyl that goes to Mexico and is then put into production to make fentanyl by the cartels comes from China. And not just some private company in China. It comes from CCP sponsored ships into Mexico. And over 60% of the fentanyl that comes across that border is of a lethal dose. So it's being used as a weapon, and it's coming from one of our adversaries. So it's being used as a chemical weapon. And you know what they told me? They said, well, Matt, that's not our lane. That's a narcotics issue. So we don't say the F word in this office. That's what they told me. As a quote, we don't say the F word in this office. So I wasn't allowed to speak about fentanyl after that day, is what they told me.
But I
And,
mean,
and
the Department for Homeland Security should protect and secure the homeland. That's kind of it. It's in its name. And drugs is a huge issue, decimating many Americans. So surely that should be a big part of the role of Department of Homeland Security. But is that basically that? Well, this is my patch, and that's me, the DEA's patch, and we kind of have a understanding that we don't really get involved with each other, and that's why these issues become worse and worse, because you don't have interdepartmental conversations, I guess.
exactly, we don't have departmental conversations that we should have. Sometimes it's laziness because a lot of these people are lazy. Most of the time it's risk adverseness because, like I said, they don't want to bring any attention, something that could be potentially controversial to their program, as the leader of that program. Um, but most of the time, it's because it's the Department of Homeland Security's fault that we have a fentanyl crisis here in America. They're the ones that allowed the border to be wide open. It's the Biden administration's fault. And a lot of people are protective of the Biden administration because they're in support of it. And obviously, they're protective of the Department of Homeland Security because they've been working there for years and years and years. And they don't want to admit their faults and admit their mistakes. So instead, they cover it up. And that's what happens. So I was quickly identified as somebody who's willing to push back and somebody that will push back and is not concerned with going with the flow and ignoring blatant unconstitutional acts by our government for a paycheck every 2 weeks. And that's what happens in the government is they're they're able to get away with what they get away with because people don't want to lose their job. They don't want to fight back because all they've done their entire life is work for the government. And if they do lose their job, they have no other way to provide for their family. And on one hand, you can kind of understand that, but then on the other hand, you come back to reality and common sense tells you that they're harming their children and their grandchildren by thinking that they're protecting their family by keeping their job. And what I mean by that is if we ignore the illegal acts that our government is taking place, that is at the least complicit in, and oftentimes are leading. If we ignore those illegal acts happening by our government, all you're doing is handing that fight off in the future to your children and your grandchildren, and it's going to become an even more difficult fight, an even deeper hole to dig out of. So the best thing you can do right now is fight back, with the potential of losing your job. But you got to do the right thing for America and Americans because that means you're doing the right thing for your children. And I just don't understand how that doesn't compute with some people.
But I get it's not just an American issue. I have read many reports in the UK, for instance, around the Muslim rape gangs, the grooming gangs, that have been going on for 6 decades in the UK. At a minimum, 250,000 girls being part of those gangs. And then you look at, well, some government ministers have got involved and said they're going to get to the bottom of this. They're going to have a report. They're going to find out what's happening. And two government ministers, I remember specifically, basically every 3 months they would meet with the department on this issue and they'd be told, well, these are the issues, the difficulties, we can't do that yet. And one minister found that after 9 months, zero had been done on it because the department weren't interested in carrying out the wishes of the government. They were only interested in making sure they were still employed as an entity. So, I mean, that's the civil service called the blob in the UK.
That's right.
So it's kind of, this is the same probably wherever country you find yourselves, people in the jobs supposedly to action the wishes of the government, but they're not really interested in that.
No, they're only interested in protecting themselves and protecting their own careers and financial futures. That's what it comes down to. But the ironic part is at the same time they're directly fighting against that, because they're complicit in stripping Americans, which is, includes them of our constitutional rights, which eventually it'll catch up to them and they'll regret being complicit and ignoring the things that they saw over their careers. And we're tricked into believing that we've got one side fighting for us, that is Republicans versus Democrat. And if this party takes over, we're finally going to have somebody in positions of power fighting for us. When in fact, these Democrats and these Republicans, from politicians to political appointees to high level government officials, they all work for the same people. And that was proven to me when the Trump administration took over back in January. We got a new assistant secretary that led the CWMD program that I worked for. And we were finally able to start talking about fentanyl being used as a chemical weapon. And I led the charge on that in that office. And the new assistant secretary allowed us to start a working group to see if indeed fentanyl was being used as a weapon, and to see if it was being used as a weapon of mass destruction. So we had 10 different working group sessions on that specifically to decide whether or not fentanyl in America was being used as a weapon of mass destruction. And at the end of those those 10 meetings, at the end of that working group, we had a vote, and there was every agency under the Department of Homeland Security present for that vote, including a department in the DoD, the weapon of mass destruction team for the DoD. And everybody unanimously agreed that fentanyl is being used as a weapon of mass destruction in its illicit manufacturing and distribution. So illegal fentanyl is being used as a weapon of mass destruction because it's killing more Americans than anything. So we drafted a memo to be sent to the president for him to make a national declaration that fentanyl is being used as a weapon of mass destruction. Well, that memo got killed in the secretary of DHS's office. Christy Noem, her office killed it. And it was Troy Edgar, her deputy, and Corey Lewandowski that killed that memo and wouldn't allow it to get to the president. And I heard, so in those meetings, I would continuously got pushback on making fentanyl declaring fentanyl, illegal fentanyl, a weapon of mass destruction. And I was going to say you'd be surprised, but you probably wouldn't. The excuses that they gave me on why we can't declare illegal fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction. They said that if we declare illegal fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction, then it's going to have a negative impact on the pharmaceutical industry. Because although we're only declaring the illegal manufacturing and distribution of fentanyl as a WMD, doctors across the nation are going to be hesitant to prescribe legal fentanyl just because it has that WMD tag attached to it. And I said, hey guys, are we here to represent the pharmaceutical companies, or are we here to represent the American people? Because last time I checked, it's the American people who are paying our salaries for us to be here to protect them. And as hard as I fought, and as much of a bigger target as I painted on my back for standing up for the American people in those working group sessions, it was killed. And it was killed by a Republican administration. And I can't tell you for sure if Trump knows who he actually has working for him, but he has put some people, some appointees in positions of great power that if he truly is behind the agenda that he told us he was behind on the campaign trail, they are not in support of his agenda. And I saw several instances of that at my time at DHS, and that's just one of them. There was also an incident that happened involving the governor of Louisiana. Do you remember, Peter, the terror attack on Bourbon Street in New Orleans on New Year's Day? Remember that guy that mowed down all those people with his car?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tragic incident, obviously. A guy, ran over multiple people in New Orleans, got out, started shooting. Well, the governor of Louisiana declared an emergency because of that situation, which him declaring an emergency meant that he was able to be reimbursed by the federal government for the incident that happened, for the cleanup and such. So he sent a $50 million bill to the Department of Homeland Security for that incident. There's no way, as tragic as that incident was, there's no way a guy that ran over a few people, I don't remember how many it was, 10, something like that. There's no way that incident cost the state of Louisiana $50 million. So I think it's obvious, in my opinion, that there was a lot of corruption baked into that $50 million request. And there's a lot of things that are related to the government of Louisiana that just they don't make sense and they don't add up. For example, Corey Lewandowski. So just to give you a little background on what's going on at DHS right now, as you probably know, Christy Noem is the Department of Homeland Security secretary. Well, she's not actually the one running the Department of Homeland Security. Christy Lewandowski, the guy that she had been rumored to be having an affair with, is the one that's actually running the Department of Homeland Security. Christy Noem is just cosplaying. She's out there with photo ops and putting videos on social media, acting like she's getting ready to kick in the door with ICE, because she's campaigning for 2028. That's all she's doing is campaigning for 2028. And Corey Lewandowski is the one in all these senior level meetings and the one actually running DHS. Well, Corey Lewandowski was also a consultant, a paid consultant for the governor of Louisiana as well, and multiple contracts in Louisiana. Well, Kristi Noem and Corey Lewandowski promised backstage behind the curtains, they promised Governor Landry of Louisiana that this $50 million would get paid to him one way or another. And so at that point, Governor Landry sent that $50 million bill to DHS, which they routed through FEMA, and they wanted FEMA to use their funds to pay that $50 million disaster claim. Well, per protocol, the FEMA administrator at the time, Cameron Hamilton, he sent that request to the White House, and President Trump denied that request. I think because he saw the obvious corruption baked into that $50 million request. And so it sent the denial back to FEMA. So FEMA sent the denial to the Secretary's office of DHS, sent it to Corey Lewandowski and Troy Edgar, and said, the president has denied this request. Please let the governor of Louisiana know. Well, they told Cameron Hamilton, regardless of what the president said, this $50 million bill needs to be paid by FEMA. So find a way. And Cameron denied. And that's when the rift between Corey Lewandowski and Cameron Hamilton started. And Cameron Hamilton was eventually fired by Corey Lewandowski as the administrator of FEMA over him trying to stop the corruption that continues to plague the Department of Homeland Security today. And I don't know if President Trump knows these things are going on or not, but I've been trying to get word to people that may be able to get the word to him that it's going on. And this is what happens in the government, Peter. We think we have a Republican administration. We have Republican political appointees that are going to work for us and end the corruption and save us money and be good stewards of our tax dollars, when in fact, they're going to turn around and use our tax dollars for the same corruption that the Democrat Party uses it for, which is personal and political gain. And I was eventually fired as well for blowing the whistle on some of that stuff. And it's disappointing, but I've got a lawsuit that's getting ready to start against it for a wrongful termination suit. So we'll see what happens with that. But once again, I'm in the fight with the government. This time it's the federal government. So hopefully I'm victorious in this as well. And hopefully, at the very least, what me taking on this fight does and telling my story about my time at DHS is it brings awareness to people, the government citizens the American citizens that should have oversight of the government and know exactly what's going on and know the corruption that's still taking place today, even under the Trump administration. And hopefully people will just start screaming it from the rooftops so the president will notice and he'll hear. And hopefully he's not complicit in it. Not saying that he is. I don't believe that he is. I hope that he's not. But I'm not. I don't serve a man. I'm not beholden to any man. I'm not a blind Trump supporter. I support President Trump absolutely. But if he continues to do the things that he does, I have no option but to call him out as well. If he keeps putting these corrupt people in these positions of power, then I got to assume that he's complicit in it, because why else would he do it? So I'm hoping that he turns the corner here very soon and he gets rid of some people that he needs to get rid of, and he stops sending, he stops supporting bills that are packed with pork that are not good for the American people. Just think about that, Peter. We complain as conservatives, as American citizens, all the time that these bills that Democrats send forward have multiple issues within them. And all they do is highlight the couple of good issues that are, bipartisanly good for America, like, maybe a tax cut or something, or an increase here or a cut there that all of us are in favor of. And they don't talk about all of the other stuff that they talk about the two good issues in that bill that are good for Americans, but they hide the other 98 issues that are actually corrupt and actually not good for Americans and are actually going to cost us way more tax dollars than we're saving. We're tired of those big, beautiful bills. We want single issue bills to go to the floor and be voted on, so we see how our representatives vote on specific issues. But even with the Republican administration, we can't get that. And that's why it's frustrating. And that's why we got to call out even Republicans and Donald Trump is if they're willing to do that. It's our job. We shouldn't be beholden to any one man or any party. We should be beholden to the American people, our children, our children's future. That's who we should be beholden to.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Tell us a little bit about the DHS, because the DHS only appeared after September the 11th, but yet I think I read it was the third largest cabinet department after the DoD. I think Veterans Affairs. So it is a huge. Think I think it was 100,000, over 100,000 staff there, 250 billion, so a quarter of a trillion. That just to put that in a UK context, I know you guys spend money like water, but a quarter of a trillion dollars spent on it. Fill us in a little bit, because I guess that work being done by a mixture of maybe the DoD, and were there other departments, or kind of fill it in, because yeah, just over 20 years ago it wasn't around, 22 years ago.
Well, DHS is kind of like those bills I was just talking about, where you have a couple agencies within DHS that actually do really good work for Americans. But then you have a whole bunch of other agencies that actually just work against Americans. And they disguise themselves as a program that are here for the American people, here to protect the American people, like FEMA, here to respond to emergencies in your greatest time of need as an American um, citizenry. But in fact, these people are actually working against us. They highlight, like, just like these bills, they highlight a couple of good things that they do for us, like respond to disasters and put people who lost their homes up in trailers for a couple of months. But then they hide the fact that they're spending $300 million to house illegal immigrants in the Roosevelt Hotel in New York City. So DHS, in my opinion, just like the CIA and the FBI, they do more harm to Americans than they do good. And I got to see some of that for myself. When I saw that for myself as an intel analyst up there, when they were targeting U.S. citizens that just lost everything in a hurricane, surveilling these citizens illegally. The Department of Homeland Security, in my opinion, needs to go away. And we should only save the agencies that actually work for the American people, like CBP and ICE and HSI. The other stuff is just the same as what's in those bills. It's pork. It's a money laundering scheme. It's a money laundering operation. And a lot of these people, these senior government officials and political appointees and senior advisors, it's their personal piggy bank, because a lot of these people are consultants in other places. They have their own companies that they have government contracts with, that in their positions they're able to steer those certain contracts to their companies or the companies that they have relationships with. And then once they're no longer a senior advisor, magically they're on the board of these companies that they steered contracts with. It's all about self-preservation, and it's all about these people becoming richer off the backs of hardworking Americans that are forced at gunpoint to pay over 50% of our salary to them. And it's frustrating, because not a lot of people pay attention, not a lot of people know. And then what's also frustrating is, what options do we have to fight back? Because it's so big and it's so deep that it's not like 1776, where a group of people can just rise up and and take our country back. It's technology has put us in a place where 20 drones can stop 2,000 people. You know what I mean? So we're in a bad spot here in our country, and doesn't mean we give up and we just let them run over us and do what they want to do. We got to fight back. But we've got to be honest with ourselves when it comes to these politicians and these political appointees and these government workers that aren't actually working for us. I think one way we can make change very quickly, Peter, is by not supporting these Republican politicians when they run anymore. A lot of times what happens is they spend a ton of money to win the primaries, these rhinos or whatever you want to call them, establishment Republicans. And then we're left with the decision to support either the bad Republican or the even worse Democrat. And in my opinion, what we should stop doing is supporting either one of them. And then maybe the Democrats start winning in landslides, and they run us off that cliff. They run us off that cliff at 100 miles an hour instead of at 60 miles an hour like these bad Republicans do. Maybe that wakes more people up, and maybe the Republican Party changes if we stop supporting them. But to me, that's the only way. We got to stop voting for a party and only vote for people. And if there's nobody to vote for because they're both corrupt, then we don't support anybody. And there's nobody in Congress right now that deserves anybody's vote.
Matt, one of the issues is that, and I didn't realize this until I spent so long in the US over the last few years, is the election cycle that politicians are not really there to do good for the people. They are there to think of the next election cycle, which is every 2 years. And in the UK, we have like a 5 year. In the US, it's every 2 years. And therefore, they're only there for a couple of months before they're thinking of 18 months away and raising money. And that's where I think the whole lobby industry comes in, because it's nonstop. And they attach onto that like leeches. So whatever department it is, whoever the politician is, they seem to get succumbed by this lobby industry that just sucks them in. And that's going to take a heck of a lot. You watch the stuff that Bobby Kennedy's doing in the Maha against the food industry, the farm industry. You mentioned pharma against restrictions on fentanyl. You've got these huge groups that are giants. It's very difficult to push back.
That's exactly right. I mean, it's bullshit in my opinion that congressional seats are a 2 year seat, and I think that they should be at least a 4 year seat. But I guess the gift and the curse with that would be they don't have to turn around and worry about an election next year or running a campaign the following year. But I guess the bad part about that is if a bad Republican or Democrat gets elected, now we're stuck with them for 4 years. And that's why these elections are so important. But you're right. I mean, as soon as these people get elected, they only have a few months where they don't have to think about campaigning. And then they have to turn around and hit the campaign trail again. And that's why they're beholden to these lobbyists, like you said, because these lobbyists come in with millions and millions of dollars, and they let these congressional candidates know, or they let these Congress members know that, hey, listen, as long as you do X, Y, and Z, you don't have to worry about your election. We got you. We'll make sure you get over that hump. We'll outspend whoever runs against you 10-1. And that's why they're beholden to these lobbyist groups. That's why they're beholden to the military industrial complex and to the pharmaceutical industry and to the big media industry, because these are the people that are actually winning the campaigns for them. And that's why you wonder why on the campaign trail did this awesome conservative and this Republican that loves America say one thing, and then we elect them and they do the absolute opposite. And then they stop speaking about the things they were speaking about on the campaign trail. It doesn't make sense to people. Well, that's why. Because once they get to Congress, they're beholden to somebody else other than you. They're beholden to the lobbyists that actually win these campaigns for them and actually make these people richer. And when these representatives get to DC and they get a taste of that power, they don't want to let it go. They'll do anything that they have to do to make sure that they stay relevant, and they keep holding that power, and then they keep bringing in these hundreds of thousands of dollars for their family. It's all about self-preservation, and it's not about the American people. And that's the problem. I think that these positions pay too much, and I think that these terms are too short. And I don't think that any lobbyist should be able to be involved in campaigns at all whatsoever. I think the only donations that you should be able to accept are from the people that can vote for you. That's it, people. And I think there should be a cap on that as well, because why do you need, $5 million to run a campaign in a small congressional district? You don't. The only reason you do is so people can buy you, and you're beholden to them now once you win that seat. So there's a lot of things that have to change in the campaign process. The first thing is campaign finance reform, because these people just buy these seats. And until that happens, this corruption will always be in politics, unfortunately.
Not will. Matt, just to finish off, before you go, what is next for you? Obviously, you're busy running Gourmeltz, the best restaurant there in Virginia, and maybe much wider. You're busy putting your thoughts online and speaking truth there, and that's people can follow you. What else do you have planned now you've been kicked out of the DHS?
Well, I honestly never plan anything. I just do what's right, to be honest with you. And I take on the fights as they come to me, and they seem to be coming to me in droves the past few years, unfortunately. But my plans is just to grow my restaurant as much as I can, and hope enough patrons come out to support to make it a business that I can support my family with, because I think my government career is done now that I blew the whistle and I put on blast some of the things that our U.S. government is doing. But as far as, I guess, whatever you want to call it, my activism goes, I'm just going to continue to keep telling the truth on social media as I know it to be, and hope a lot more people wake up to the vulnerability that they're putting themselves in by just blindly supporting politicians and political parties. My goal is just to prove to people that they've been lied to, they've been hoodwinked, and we are the majority here in this country. I mean, we're a much larger group than the people that work for the government, than the politicians, than the political appointees. We can't make a change if you're willing to. If you're willing to be uncomfortable for a short period of time, we can have a very long time of prosperity here in America. But it's going to take you being uncomfortable and fighting back. I mean, look at all the promises we were made by this Trump administration to get him elected. We still don't know who killed JFK. We still don't know who's in those Epstein files. There's still no repercussions for people that allowed the vast majority of Americans to be shot up with a poisonous quote unquote vaccine. We still have no justice for the people who were fired because they didn't want to take that jab. We still have no justice for the businesses that were shuttered by the draconian mandates that were put in place. There's still no accountability, Peter. And without accountability, it happens again. Just as human beings, we learn from consequences from a very young age. As a kid, you learn not to do something when there's consequences behind doing it. And that's the same until the day we die. And if these people have no consequences for the evil acts that they've committed the past few years, they will do it again, Peter, and it'll be worse next time. So I'm asking Donald Trump and the rest of the Trump administration, let's make it happen, and let's stop making excuses. Let's stop saying, hey, we got some stuff to put out to you guys about the Epstein files. It's coming. I'm tired of it coming. I want it to be here. Stop BSing us and telling us that you're redacting certain things. We know there's AI tools that can redact thousands of pages within a few seconds. So don't give me that bullshit. I'm not a kid. I understand how the process works. And if you really wanted to put the information out, you can put it out tomorrow, but you don't. So what that tells me is you're complicit. So as an American, I'm asking for that to stop. I'm asking for the Trump administration to do what we put them there to do. I still got faith in trusting President Trump because he hasn't given me a full reason not to have faith in him. But it's slowly waning, to be honest with you. I'm starting to think that everything that they told us on the campaign trail is not going to come to fruition. Why do I think that? Because it hasn't. That's it. So I'm hoping that eventually it does happen. So I can be comfortable with the fact that I didn't get hoodwinked again. But I'm slowly coming to the realization that might have happened. But like I said, none of these Americans should feel a blind loyalty to any one man or any political party. You should be here to protect your family, and your family is Americans. So in turn, you should be here to protect Americans. And if somebody's in a position of power that isn't being honest with us and isn't being fully transparent with us, and are hiding behind regulations for the government and classifications that shouldn't be classified, if you got people hiding behind that, well, you need to start calling them out, because this is your family that it's going to be detrimental to.
Exactly. Matt, thank you so much for your time. Always appreciate you coming on, giving us your thoughts. So, yeah, thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, absolutely, Peter. Thank you for staying involved in U.S. politics over there in the UK, brother. And I hope that our country does get saved. Because this is the greatest experiment, I believe, that's ever happened in the world, and it's been a positive experience thus far, even with the corruption that's been involved the past decades. But I think we have a possibility. We have a chance to save it. and I hope you guys do too over there in the UK. You guys are going through some very different turmoil than we are. That in some instances is even graver than what we're going through. So hope you guys come out of this on the winning end as well, brother.
Yeah, the censorship and surveillance that we have is on a different level, so we will
Oh,
see. But Matt, thanks as always.
absolutely, man. Thanks, Peter. Appreciate it, brother.